Hello friends, welcome to JavaEE EJB JPA tutorial. Now you are watching part 2 of the subseries JPA relation 1 to n and n to 1. That means many to one and one to many relations. In the last video, we discussed about the pubs database tables, employee and jobs. We also talked about how these two tables makes many to one and one to many relation. In this video, we will create entities for those two tables. That means for employee and job. Then we will learn the annotation many to one and one to many. In the last video, we talked about these two tables and we will create entity for these two tables. That's for employee as well as jobs. So employee entity that we will create now maps to employee table. So that means here we will be creating one entity, and if you see, this is the entity that we will create, which will map to the employee table. So this is entity and this one is table. And if you see here, we are not picking all the columns. For example, for our example, we are picking this ID, then first name, middle int, and we are picking it as a middle name, then last name. After that, we are picking job level, and this one is the linking field, link 1, and that link 1 denotes or maps to this column. Next, so this is employee entity, and the second entity is job entity, maps to jobs table. Here if you see, this is our second entity, job. This one will be the first entity, employee 1, and second entity will be the job, which maps to job table. And here if you see, we are mapping job ID, job description, minimum experience and maximum experience, and this one is the linking column. And if you see, there is no column in the database, but here we introduce one field, so this will refer back to the employee entity. So that means here we will be achieving unidirectional, the bidirectional relation. When you have employee, you can get job details, and similarly when you have job, you will get employee details. Here employee entity will have containment of job. So there will be a job entity and we will have a containment of that job entity inside the employee. Job entity has containment of array of employees. So if you see here, this is n to 1 mapping, that means many to one. So many employee record may map to a single job entity. Many employee record, in the sense we can call it as many employee entities can map to a job column. Job X. So that means if you pick only one entity mapping to one job entity, here if you pick only one entity, you will be seeing it as a 1 to 1. That's why here we have job as a containment. But here if you see, we will have employee array. Why? Because this is for given job there will be n number of employees. So when the entity at runtime, when it represents, say for example editor, that's the title, then through this containment array of employee, we will get all the employees who is performing the editor job. So that's why from here when you move one job title maps to many employee. Here many employee maps to single. So the target, if you see 1, here the target is n. So that's why here we are having array and here we are having single job as a containment. Here array of employee in the job entity. Look how the icon denotes the link type. So when you create the entity, so this is the link type, right? This icon. So if you want to see it in a bigger way, E1, this is the employee 1 entity, and if you see here many employee, that means M1, M2, M3 all are mapping to single job. So this is a job. Many employees pointing to single job. That's what this icon denotes. It's just zoomed out here. And if I take only one here, it's the entity, right? One employee entity is pointing to one job entity. But there is a possibility of, if we take them separately, there are 3 entities which is pointing to same job entity. So on the whole, this picture or this icon represents n to 1. That means many to one relation. That's how the icon denotes. Just by looking at the icon itself, you can say this is the employee entity, and these are all the column, and there is a join column, and this join is many to one join. Now let's come back to this job. The entity picture, if you see one job, this is the source, right? And this one is the target. The source here is job. So left side represents the source is job, target is employee, and if you see one job is pointing to n number of employees. So here n employees pointing to one job, n to 1. Here it is 1 to n, 1 to many. So, and since we are providing link on both the side of the entity, we can say that here we are achieving the the bidirectional relation. Here we will learn one to many annotation. That means one to many annotation. That means here job entity we will mark with one to many annotation. Then employee entity we will mark with many to one annotation. Many to one, one to many, right? All right. Now let's go to the demo and create these two entities in Eclipse. Since we already created entity in our previous sub-series, I'm not explaining that with a separate slide here. We will directly go to Eclipse and we will start creating two entities. One for employee mapping and another one is for jobs mapping. Alright, now let's go to Eclipse. So here is our workspace, and in the workspace we are choosing the property for JPA savings account. Before that, we'll go to database development perspective. And we will connect to SQL Server. So database is connected. Now we will switch back to JavaEE perspective. Properties, JPA, and here we will select none and set back to SQL Server. And here we are seeing the connection is available with Eclipse. Apply and OK. Now it's time to go ahead and create the entities. If you see, at this moment we have two entities. When I open persistence, as part of our previous subseries, we created location entity and savings account entity. Now let me right click and choose new JPA entity. Here we will provide Java package name as tube.coding.examples.jpa entity. Class name here we are giving it as employee. So remaining, I am accepting the default and moving to the next page. Here we have to add the fields. Type is a string. Field name is first name, middle name and last name. Okay. And then we need this ID also. String, let's cross check it. Okay, that's char, so we can go ahead with the string. So that's all. We have 4 fields: first name, mid name, last name and ID. Entity name is employee. Here we will click the finish button. So let's forget about this error for now. Synchronize class list. And if you see here, we have our new entity added, and in the source also you can see that our persistent unit JPA savings account now managing 3 entities: employee, location, savings account. So in this video we added this employee entity. It has some error, we will correct it later. Now we will switch to JPA perspective. So if you see here, employee is in opened state. Now I'm clicking the entity name employee. And we will choose table as, remember we already connected SQL Server database with the Eclipse. So now it will show all the tables, and I'm picking employee, and this will add an annotation table name as employee here. Now here if you see the field names are different, we will take first name and map that with the column F name. Then we will take middle name and map that with M init, middle initial, that's the database column name here. Next we will take last name. I think we need a job level also. We will directly add that field here. So last name we can map it with L name. Job level we can map it with job LVL. Control S, saving the content, and ID, let me keep it as a first field. And ID, since it's a key field, let's mark this with annotation ID, and we will click the save all button. Then we will choose this ID field and map that with emp ID. So that's all. The moment you specify the ID field, the error at entity will go away. So here entity mapping is done. Now we will switch to JavaEE perspective, and we will right click this entity, source, override or implement method, and we will override the toString method here. So this will be the code snippet 2 for our subseries 8. So in the toString override, we are appending first name, middle name and last name. I mean, we are concatenating all these three fields and returning that. Next we will create a job entity. For that I'm moving to JPA perspective once again. Under our JPA savings account, we are creating a new JPA entity. This time we will give the name as job. type is integer, job ID, then string job description. So here we are just matching with the database field, and if you see here for jobs, column description is varchar, ID is int, minimum level and maximum level, these two fields are integer data types. Min exp, I'm going to say minimum experience, and max experience. So that's all, and here we are clicking finish, and we have job entity ready. Marking we have to do. So as usual, we will go here, and we will ask to synchronize the class list, and you can see job entity is also added here. Here I'm picking job entity name, and picking table as jobs. So the list here shows all the tables available in the pubs database. So here I'm choosing jobs. It added the table name, annotation, job ID. So let's mark this as ID, save. We will mark with job ID, and primary key generation, generated value. So we are marking this as a generated value, and generator name is we will choose identity. So generated value, identity, seed 1, step 1, those stuff. So other stuff we can go with column mapping, and this is a job description. Okay, next minimum experience, min level. So if you see here, our field name is different from database column name. So in our previous example, we had both with the same name, but this time we are using a different field name, and we are doing the database column mapping. So here for readability purpose, we provided a minimum experience, maximum experience, but in database level it is called minimum level and maximum level, like that. So annotation is completed for job entity. Here for employee table, we will be adding many to one annotation. Here you can see many employee may refer one job entity, but here we are dealing with a single employee entity, and this entity will map to a specific job title. So we are marking it with as many to one, and join column is job ID. Field name, we are making a containment. So field type is job and field name is job, J in lowercase. Now if you look at this, we are having the join many to one, and here also you can have a look, JPA detail. Target entity is job. The join is going from employee, right? In the employee we added this entity, I mean the many to one annotation. So target is job, fetch all those stuff is a default, and here if you see job ID, that's the column name, refers to default job ID. So job ID is the field which we marked here. It's a database field, job ID. For employee table, if you see, the job ID is the database field name, and we specified that here join column in the database is job ID, and here we defined the field private job and marked that with many to one annotation. And in the meantime you have to look at the target entity. So we declare this many to one inside the employee. That means this is the source, job is the source, or employee is the source, and target employee is the source, and the target is the job entity. Also here source, if you see, the join column is job ID database field, and the target default job ID. That means by default it will go and pick the key column and joins there. Now we are in job entity. In the employee entity, if you see, the containment is a single job entity, but here in job, okay, we will correct this error in a moment. Here if you see, we are marking this as one to many, so the target is many here. That means the entity, job entity, maps to many employee entity. That's why here we are going with array list. So importing the package java.util, array list of employee. This is interface from JavaUtil. So here we are using cascade as all, right? Now let's go ahead and fix that. Cascade is all. Now that will resolve that error. So we are done with the one to many annotation. If you look again, employee, the join is many to one. Join column is job ID in the source table. In the source table, in the sense, in the employee table, which is pointing to entity job. And here we doesn't specify any job column. That means it goes to the default ID column, job ID, that you can see here. In the joining strategy itself, job ID in the source maps to default key field in the target. Target is JPA entity. Job. JPA entity job. That's the target. The same way, if we move to job, this is employee, and if you see, the entity is job and containment is employee. That's the target. Mapped by job. So here we are specifying the field, job field, mapped by job, and then we are making the containment. Once again, many to one, mapping column in the source table is job ID, and in the target we doesn't specify the column, but it directly goes to the key column of the job. In job, we are making an annotation for one to many, one job to many employee. Cascade, we are defining it as all, and mapped by the field job. This way we are establishing the bidirectional relation. Alright, now we will go ahead and define getters and setters. We'll go to JavaEE perspective. So in the employee, if you see, we have getters and setters for first name, middle name, last name, all the stuff. But we defined this column after the entity was created. So when entity was created by the Eclipse UI, it provided the getters and setters, but here we added this manually. That means we need to provide getter and setter for this job. So here I am choosing this job. So generate getters and setters. So it will be there towards the end, and we have getters and setters here. Similarly, we will go to job and we will pick this list of employees and choose generate getters and setters. So if you see, it setter will take list of employee, get employees will return the list of employee. So it will be towards the end. So that's all here. We created both the entities. Let's cross check once. Persistence.xml. At present, our persistent unit JPA savings account is managing 4 entities. And we can see that here as well. Alright, now we will switch to JavaEE. We will start the server. Server is started, and we will deploy EJB EAR, and we'll click finish here. So here we are seeing deployed. All right, that's all. So the entities are ready. Now we will stop this. We don't have any error, and we will continue remaining stuff in the next sub-series. I mean the next video. Stopped, and we will remove this, and we will remove this, and we will stop our server. That's all here in this video. Thank you for watching. Bye.